The day started like any other. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the earth. People went about their daily routines, from busy streets filled with commuters to peaceful villages waking up with the morning breeze. It was a perfect morning. But none of them knew that in the skies above, something unimaginable was happening. It began with a strange sight, a sudden, unexplained darkening of the sky. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't a shadow from the clouds. The sky simply went dark, as if someone had pulled the sun behind a curtain. For a brief moment, panic swept through the people below, but no one could understand what was happening. That is, until the first ship appeared. At first, it was just a tiny speck in the sky, too small to be seen clearly. Then it grew larger, and larger still. Soon, it was unmistakable. A giant spacecraft, unlike anything the world had ever seen. A massive, dark shape, hovering in the sky with no sound. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't anything from Earth. It was something alien. The news spread quickly. Phones rang, radios blared, and television screens flickered to life. Breaking news. The headlines screamed. People everywhere watched in disbelief as more ships appeared, one after another, all over the world. Major cities, New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, all had their own alien ship descending from the sky. The ships were massive, silent, and perfect. No signs of weapons or weapon systems. No engines or noise. It was like they had simply appeared out of nowhere. At first, there was a sense of awe. People had dreamed of this moment. Aliens, visitors from another world. The government reassured the public, saying everything would be fine, and world leaders began to prepare for the meeting of the century. Experts from every corner of the earth rushed to prepare speeches and explanations, thinking the moment was a historic one. Humankind's first contact with an advanced species. But then, something strange happened. The ships didn't land. They just hovered, suspended in the sky, impossibly still. The world waited and waited. The silence was deafening. For hours, the ships didn't move an inch. No signs of life, no signals, no communication. It was as though they were observing, waiting for something. But for what? The government's top officials scrambled to make contact. Military jets were sent up, though they were told not to engage, just to observe. Scientists rushed to study the ships, but nothing could explain them. They were beyond anything Earth had ever known. Then, as if they had been waiting for just the right moment, the first message appeared. It flashed across the world's screens in bold letters, its meaning immediately clear. We come in peace. The entire planet seemed to exhale. The words were exactly what humanity had hoped to hear. The promise of peace, the hope for cooperation, and the chance to learn from these visitors from the stars. Governments began to speak to the people with calm and reassurance. Stay calm, they said. These beings mean us no harm. But then came another message, one that chilled everyone to the bone. The text appeared suddenly, interrupting the calm messages of peace. The trap is set. Your survival depends on your choice. A cold wave of panic swept over the globe. The world's leaders scrambled to understand. Was this a joke? A threat? Were the aliens warning them of something, or was it a test? The message made no sense, and yet the weight of those words felt like an unspoken challenge. Humanity didn't know how to react. They had hoped for peace, but now, it felt like something much darker was at play. Governments and scientists tried to make sense of it. Was this a warning? A test to see if humanity would bow before the aliens, or was there something more sinister? No one knew. People across the world felt a sense of unease, but no one could figure out what to do. The world held its breath. The ships remained where they were, hanging in the sky, the massive shadows growing darker as the hours passed. People crowded the streets, staring up, waiting for something to happen. Some began to panic, fearing the worst. Others held on to hope, hoping this was all just a misunderstanding. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Helen Caldwell, a renowned scientist and expert in extraterrestrial studies, stood before a gathering of world leaders. She had been chosen to help decipher the message. The pressure was immense. As she stood there, speaking to the world, her hands trembled slightly. Her career had prepared her for many things, but not for this. No one had imagined that first contact would happen under such conditions. "We need to think logically," Dr. Caldwell said, her voice steadied despite the fear she felt. "The message is clear. We have a choice. What that choice is, we don't know yet, but we need to be careful. We cannot act rashly." Her words were meant to calm, but they did little to quell the growing fear that gripped the planet. The ships were still hovering, and the words echoed in everyone's mind. "The trap is set. Your survival depends on your choice." The alien ships remained silent. No signs of hostility. No signs of peace. The world didn't know what to make of it. Dr. Caldwell knew this moment could change the course of history, but for better or worse. The suspense hung in the air as everyone waited for the next move. The aliens were watching. The world was watching. And humanity's future hung on the edge of a knife. What would the aliens do next? What was their real plan? And what would humanity decide to do? The world was on edge as the alien ships continued to hover in the sky, casting their dark shadows over the cities below. Hours had passed since the mysterious message flashed across the screens. "The trap is set. Your survival depends on your choice." The initial shock of their arrival had faded into an unnerving stillness. People stared at the sky, waiting, but nothing happened. No attack. No signs of aggression. Just silence. The calmness of the moment only added to the fear. It felt as though the aliens were watching, observing, waiting for humanity to make a move. Governments around the world scrambled to respond, but no one had a plan. Military leaders were uncertain, unsure if they should engage or wait for further communication. The world's leaders called for a summit, bringing together top scientists, military strategists, and political figures to try and decipher the message. But Dr. Helen Caldwell, the lead scientist who had worked on decoding alien signals for years, felt an unsettling sense of dread. There was something too calculated about the way the ships hovered. Their size, their precision, the eerie lack of sound. It was as though the aliens were not just observing Earth, but testing humanity. Meanwhile, on the streets, people were divided. Some believed the aliens had good intentions, that the warning was just a misunderstanding, and they were here to help. Others, however, feared the worst. How could anyone trust beings so advanced, so unknown? Was this a peace offering or a cruel game? As speculation grew, panic began to spread. Governments tried to calm the public, but the message was clear. There was a choice to be made, and no one had any idea what that meant. Dr. Caldwell and her team worked tirelessly in the background, sifting through every detail, trying to find any clue that might reveal the aliens' true purpose. As she stood before the conference table, surrounded by experts, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was walking into a trap. The ships hadn't attacked, but why? If the aliens had wanted to harm Earth, surely they could have done so by now. No, they were waiting for something. Waiting for humanity to make a decision. A choice that would define everything. But what kind of choice was it? Was it really a test of strength, or perhaps something more sinister? A test of obedience, of control. The time had come for world leaders to make a decision. Should they prepare for war? Should they engage with the aliens diplomatically? Or should they simply wait and see? The uncertainty was unbearable. There was no clear answer. And as the hours continued to tick by, the alien ships still hung motionless in the sky. The world watched, unsure of the next move. The question that haunted everyone was simple. What would the aliens do next? The ships continued to hover, silent as ever. Yet, despite the lack of visible action, something felt different. The atmosphere was thick with tension. It was as though the ships were watching, waiting for humanity to break, to make its decision. And in that moment, the world realized the worst part of all. The aliens were not just observing Earth, they were observing humanity itself. The way people would respond to this unknown threat would determine their survival. Would they surrender? Would they fight? Would they stay silent? Humanity's future rested on their choice, and yet no one knew what the right answer was. As the minutes turned into hours, Dr. Caldwell stood in the conference room, her mind racing. She had seen the aliens' warning, she had heard their message, and yet no one could explain it. Was it truly a trap, or had the aliens merely wanted to test humanity's resolve? The weight of that uncertainty pressed down on her. The world wasn't just waiting for the aliens to act, they were waiting for themselves to act. What was the choice? What was the right decision? The clock was ticking, and humanity was still in the dark, unable to see the full picture of what was unfolding above them. In a world where survival was often decided by force, this was different. There was no war, no immediate conflict. It was a battle of wills, a test of character. And as the ships remained silent in the sky, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about the aliens. It was about humanity's response. The choice they made now would define them forever. The trap had been set, but was humanity smart enough to avoid it? The weight of the decision was unbearable, and the fear of the unknown was growing stronger with each passing second. The tension in the air was becoming unbearable as the world's leaders struggled to come to terms with the situation. Every minute felt like an eternity. The alien ships, still hovering in the sky without making a single move, only amplified the growing anxiety that gripped humanity. People across the globe watched the sky with bated breath, unsure of what would come next. Cities, usually buzzing with life, were eerily quiet. News broadcasts repeated the same messages over and over again, but no one had any answers. The countdown had begun, and humanity's fate seemed to hang in the balance. Dr. Helen Caldwell, still at the forefront of the global effort to decipher the alien presence, gathered with her team in a secure underground facility. They had spent hours poring over every detail they could find about the alien ships and the cryptic message they had sent. The words, "The trap is set. Your survival depends on your choice," repeated in her mind, echoing like a warning. She knew one thing for sure. There was no way the aliens would have made such a statement unless they had a plan in place. The more they analyzed the ships, the more it became clear that these weren't just advanced extraterrestrial vessels. They were calculating. The aliens didn't make mistakes. They had come for something. But what was it? Outside, in the streets, fear was rising. People no longer trusted the calm reassurances of the government. Some had begun to gather in large crowds, whispering to each other in dark corners about what the aliens might really want. Others had started to panic, abandoning their homes, fleeing to remote areas. A few had even begun forming protests, demanding that the military take action, that they should do something before it was too late. But there was no clear direction. How could humanity fight an enemy they knew so little about? How could they defend themselves against something they couldn't even comprehend? Back at the global summit, world leaders were locked in heated debates. The aliens had made it clear there was no time for inaction. They had given humanity a choice, but the meaning of that choice was still unclear. Should they surrender? Should they prepare for war? Or was there some other path? Some solution they hadn't considered yet? Every possibility seemed like a gamble. One thing became undeniable. The alien presence was not just a show of force. It was a test. Dr. Caldwell had said it many times before, and now it felt like the undeniable truth. The alien ships didn't appear to be on the offensive. They didn't immediately attack. Instead, they waited, watched, provoking humanity to make the first move. It was as if they were observing how humans would handle the pressure, how they would respond when pushed to the brink. Would they crumble under fear? Or would they unite and fight for their future? A new message flashed across the world's screens, interrupting the constant stream of speculation. This time, it was different. There were no words, just a series of images. A red button, a countdown timer, and then an image of Earth. The visual was so striking, so direct, that it sent a chill down the spine of everyone who saw it. Choose now. The text finally appeared beneath the images. Surrender or perish. The countdown began. The timer ticked away, slowly but surely, and people around the world could do nothing but watch. It felt like the world was holding its breath, as if something monumental was about to happen, but no one knew what. Dr. Caldwell's team was still searching for answers, trying to decode the meaning behind the alien ship's technology, but the clock was ticking, and it was clear that the aliens weren't going to wait forever. In the streets, the atmosphere was one of complete uncertainty. People gathered in small groups, some praying, others speaking in hushed tones about resistance. In other places, businesses were closing, the economy grinding to a halt as panic spread like wildfire. Yet, amidst the fear, there was a growing sense of unity. People realized that if humanity was to survive, they had to act together. The governments of the world had to make a decision, and they had to make it fast. Dr. Caldwell could feel the weight of the moment. She knew the clock was running out. As a scientist, she had spent her life preparing for the unimaginable. But this was beyond anything she had ever studied. This wasn't just an alien invasion. It was a challenge. The aliens weren't here to destroy humanity outright. They were testing humanity's resolve. They wanted to see how Earth's inhabitants would respond when faced with an impossible decision. At the summit, as the final minutes of the countdown ticked away, the leaders had still not agreed on a course of action. They were divided, each holding their own view on what humanity should do next. Some argued that surrender was the only option. Others insisted that fighting back, even without knowing what they were up against, was the only way to preserve Earth's future. As the seconds continued to disappear, Dr. Caldwell stood silently in the back of the room, her mind racing. If they didn't find a solution soon, if they didn't make the right decision, it could be too late. The alien ships were waiting for their move, and humanity was on the brink of the unknown. It was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that humanity had the strength to face the impossible. The trap had been set. But the question was, would humanity walk right into it, or would they find a way to turn the tables? The final seconds of the countdown ticked away. The entire world felt as if it were suspended in time. The pressure was unbearable, the silence almost deafening. People watched in anticipation, their hearts racing as the ticking clock counted down to the unknown. The governments had failed to reach a consensus. The military, hesitant to take any action without knowing what the alien ships were capable of, stood on high alert, ready for anything but unsure what that anything might be. Around the globe, citizens huddled together, unsure of what their leaders would decide, unsure of what their future would hold. Then, without warning, the aliens made their move. A bright light flashed from the central ship, blinding everyone who happened to be looking up. The sudden burst of energy shot downward, striking the ground in a series of blinding pulses. The air grew thick with static, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble, as if the very earth were shaking in response to the unknown force. The alien ships didn't descend or land. Instead, they extended their power, creating a field, a shimmering, crackling energy barrier that seemed to pulse with unnatural power. The world fell into stunned silence. Dr. Helen Caldwell, watching the scene unfold from the global summit, felt a chill creep down her spine. She had expected something, but this was unlike anything anyone could have predicted. The energy field enveloped entire cities, cutting them off from the rest of the world. Technology flickered and died within the radius, leaving millions in darkness. Communications were severed. The alien ships, now seemingly more menacing, remained floating high above, casting their ominous shadow across the isolated cities. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the light vanished. The ships, hovering far above, seemed to pause as if waiting for humanity's reaction. The countdown had reached 0, but instead of an immediate attack, the aliens simply watched. People stood in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Some tried to flee, but the energy field had already shut down every transportation route, leaving them trapped in the chaos. Others simply stared up, their faces filled with terror and confusion. Was this a warning? Was it a sign of things to come? Or had humanity just been given its first test? Dr. Caldwell's heart raced as she analyzed the situation. The energy field was powerful, but not destructive. It wasn't meant to kill. At least, not directly. It was a containment field, a prison of sorts, one that could trap the entire world without causing harm. It was as though the aliens were demonstrating their power without lifting a finger. It wasn't the physical might that was terrifying. It was the sheer control they had over everything. The very technology they wielded made Earth's most advanced systems look like toys. She turned to her colleagues, each of them as shaken as she was. The message had become clearer. Humanity wasn't being invaded. Not yet, at least. The aliens were testing them. They were proving they could control Earth, and the message that followed was now undeniable. Your survival depends on your choice. The aliens were offering humanity a deal. Surrender or suffer the consequences. It was a choice that seemed impossible to make. The pressure of that decision weighed heavily on the world's leaders. But Dr. Caldwell knew something the others didn't. Humanity had more to offer than the aliens had realized. The message had been clear from the start. Humanity's will was being tested, not its strength. The aliens weren't concerned with whether Earth could fight them off. They were waiting to see if humanity could be manipulated. They wanted to see how desperate the people of Earth would become, how much they would sacrifice to stay alive. But in that moment, as the world struggled to comprehend the true scale of the aliens' power, a spark of resistance began to form. Dr. Caldwell couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that humans would bend to their will, that fear would drive them into submission. But in this moment, trapped in the eerie calm of the alien field, a new realization dawned upon her. If humanity was to survive this, they needed to fight not just with weapons, but with their minds. It was a game of wits, not brute strength. And as the minutes passed, more and more people across the world began to understand this truth. They couldn't win by fighting the aliens' power. They had to find a way to outsmart it. But how? Dr. Caldwell stood, her mind racing. The alien ships had given the world a challenge. It wasn't a question of if humanity could fight back. It was about how they would choose to do so. And they didn't have much time. The world was already divided, fractured by fear and confusion. The aliens were testing humanity, not with violence, but with uncertainty. The clock had started ticking again, but this time, it was no longer just about survival. It was about proving to the aliens that humanity would not be so easily controlled. As the world braced itself for the next move, one thing was certain. The alien trap had been set, but the real question remained. Would humanity walk into it, or would they outsmart the invaders and turn the tables? The test had begun, and only time would tell what choice humanity would make. The days following the alien display were filled with fear, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. The world had watched in horror as the alien ships demonstrated their power with the energy barrier, trapping entire cities in a field of unbreakable force. Yet, nothing came after. No destruction. No weapons. The world was left to wonder. What were the aliens waiting for? What was their true purpose? In every corner of the globe, people reacted differently. Some were paralyzed by fear, unable to make sense of the situation. Some leaders, those who had initially called for caution, now began to panic, thinking that the aliens had only just begun to show their strength. They feared that if humanity didn't surrender quickly, the destruction would be next. Others, however, began to look at the alien ships with a different perspective. Could this be a bluff? A mere show of force to test humanity's reaction? Could there be a way to outsmart them? Dr. Helen Caldwell, who had been studying the aliens' message with an intensity bordering on obsession, began to piece together a theory that gave her a flicker of hope. She had spent years researching alien civilizations, studying their patterns and their behavior. She knew one thing: advanced species, like the ones now hovering above Earth, often tested for something deeper than just power. If the aliens had truly come to destroy humanity, they would have done so already. But they hadn't. Instead, they were waiting for humanity to prove itself, waiting for them to make the right decision. The real test, Dr. Caldwell realized, was not about brute force or fear. It was about humanity's ability to adapt, to rise above their fear, and to think critically in the face of the unknown. The alien message was clear: your survival depends on your choice. But the true meaning of the choice had become murkier with every passing hour. Was it about surrendering? Was it about negotiating? Or was it something even more complex? As the alien ships continued to hover, their presence looming over the cities, governments around the world convened once more. The division between the factions had never been clearer. Some countries, desperate for safety, argued for surrender, for appeasement. They believed the aliens' demonstration of power was enough to show that resistance was futile. They wanted to avoid further conflict, even if it meant giving up humanity's freedom. Others, more defiant, called for action. They wanted to fight, to show the aliens that humanity would not be so easily subdued. But the question remained: how could they fight something they couldn't even understand? In a small underground war room, Dr. Caldwell met with the world's top military strategists. She was no expert in warfare, but she knew something vital. The aliens had given humanity a chance, an opportunity to choose its fate. The question was, what choice would they make? Would they stand together, or would they fall apart? "We need to rethink this," Dr. Caldwell said, her voice steady but urgent. "These aliens aren't here to conquer. They are here to test. And if we're going to survive this, we need to stop thinking of them as invaders and start thinking of them as competitors. They want to see what we can do. They want to see if we can outthink them." A tense silence filled the room. The military leaders exchanged uncertain glances. To some, her words made sense. If the aliens had truly wanted to destroy Earth, they would have done so by now. But what did it mean to outthink them? What did that even look like? Dr. Caldwell continued, "We're assuming that they're trying to trap us, but what if they're giving us a chance to prove ourselves? What if this is a game? A challenge of our intellect, not our strength. They're not just testing our ability to fight. They're testing our ability to outsmart them." The idea was radical, but it struck a chord with several in the room. Humanity had always relied on innovation, on intelligence, on its ability to adapt. Perhaps this was the aliens' real test, not to see if humanity could fight, but to see if they could rise above the primal urge to retaliate, to see if humans could think their way out of a seemingly impossible situation. "We need to show them that we are worthy," Dr. Caldwell said, her voice gaining confidence. "We're not going to back down, but we're not going to attack either. We need to figure out what they want. We need to find the real choice they've given us, and we need to show them that we can think our way out of this." The military strategists were silent for a long moment before one of them spoke. "You're suggesting we negotiate?" he asked, his tone skeptical but intrigued. "Not negotiate. Communicate," Dr. Caldwell corrected him. "We need to find a way to prove that humanity isn't just a mindless, fearful species. We need to show them that we can be more than just a threat. We need to show them that we can outsmart them." As the conversation continued, the atmosphere began to shift. The world, for the first time in days, began to see a glimmer of hope. Perhaps they hadn't been given a choice between surrender or destruction after all. Perhaps there was another way. A way to show the aliens that humanity wasn't just a species to be dominated, that they could be more than just survivors. Meanwhile, the alien ships remained silent in the sky, their energy field still surrounding the cities they had claimed. They had made their move, And now they were waiting. They were testing humanity, yes. But perhaps they were also waiting for humanity to prove that it deserved to survive. The world had only a small window of time to act. The aliens' patience wouldn't last forever. Humanity's survival depended on the choice they made in the coming days. And if they were to succeed, they needed to rise above their fear, to stop thinking of themselves as helpless, and to show the aliens that Earth's greatest strength was not in its weapons, but in its ability to think, to adapt, and to outwit even the most advanced of foes. The stage was set. The trap had been sprung. But now, the true game was beginning. Would humanity play the aliens' game and win? Or would they fall into the trap and lose everything? The world held its breath in the wake of Dr. Caldwell's declaration. Humanity was standing at the crossroads of extinction and survival, and the next few decisions would be the ones that determined their future. The alien ships had shown their power, demonstrated their control over Earth's cities, and now the question was not about resisting with weapons or diplomacy. It was about proving humanity's intelligence, its capacity for critical thinking, and its ability to adapt to the unimaginable. But time was running out, and every second that passed brought them closer to the moment when the aliens might no longer be so patient. The alien presence had become an undeniable fact. Hovering in the skies, their ships were beyond the reach of Earth's best weapons, impervious to attack. Their energy field had isolated entire cities, severing all communications and transportation, creating a sense of helplessness among the masses. People were frightened, unsure whether they should fight, surrender, or simply wait for the next move. Dr. Caldwell knew that humanity had to prove something greater than its ability to wage war. They had to show the aliens they weren't just a species to be conquered. They had to show that they could be trusted, that they could overcome the fear and chaos, and think their way out of this. But even as Dr. Caldwell strategized with the world's leaders, the true nature of the alien challenge was becoming more apparent. The aliens had not attacked. They had not launched any destructive strikes. No bombs. No devastating weapons. Instead, they were allowing humanity to stew in uncertainty, giving them time to question themselves, to look inward and decide what they stood for. The aliens were watching, waiting for a sign of strength. They wanted to see how humanity would respond when pushed to the brink. Would they give in to fear, or would they come together and face the unknown with intelligence and unity? As world leaders began to formulate a strategy based on Dr. Caldwell's insights, the atmosphere in the streets began to change. In every major city, from the bustling streets of New York to the quiet alleys of Tokyo, people were beginning to come together, not in panic, but in action. They no longer stood divided by fear. They began to form alliances, putting aside their differences to work toward a single goal: survival. Governments called for the establishment of communication channels with the aliens, trying to decode any further messages and understand the true scope of the alien presence. But no message came. Instead, the countdown timer reappeared, this time larger and more visible than before. It appeared across every screen, broadcasted to the world, as if the aliens were watching humanity's every move. The message was simple: time is running out. Choose wisely. Dr. Caldwell sat before a global summit, her mind racing. She had seen this before in her years of studying alien civilizations. Tests of intellect, of will, of leadership. The aliens had designed this as a challenge, one they knew humanity would struggle to face. The longer humanity delayed, the more the stakes grew. The aliens were giving them a choice, and it had never been more urgent. "We need to send a signal," Dr. Caldwell said firmly to the leaders. "We can't sit in silence any longer. The aliens are waiting for us to act. If we just sit back and wait, we'll prove them right. We'll show them that humanity is weak, indecisive, and incapable of leading itself." The room fell quiet. Leaders from all over the world nodded. They knew she was right. Fear had driven them to inaction, but that time was over. They had to do something, and fast. The alien ships had shown they were willing to give humanity the space to act. whether that was an act of resistance, submission, or something else entirely. First, we need to unite. One leader from the European Union spoke up. We've been fragmented for too long. If we want to survive, we must stand together. No more bickering. No more hesitation. We show the aliens that humanity can work together, that we are stronger than we appear. Dr. Caldwell nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. She had always believed in humanity's ability to adapt, to overcome its faults. This might be their greatest test, but it was also their greatest chance. We've been divided, another leader from Africa said, his voice unwavering. But it's time to stand as one. The aliens think they've cornered us. They think we're weak. Let's show them they're wrong. The summit room filled with a sense of purpose, as if something inside the leaders had shifted. They weren't just scrambling to survive anymore. They were now determined to outwit the aliens. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its military, its economy, or its technology. It was its unity, its ability to think. The time for indecision was over. Simultaneously, as the leaders came to this collective realization, something else was happening in the streets. Across the world, individuals who had once feared the alien presence were now taking to the streets in defiance. They weren't just protesting or panicking. They were organizing. They were working together in their own ways, creating grassroots networks of communication, pooling resources, sharing information, and building the foundations of a collective effort. They weren't waiting for orders from their governments. They were acting on their own. Humanity was beginning to respond not out of fear, but out of a newfound strength. The countdown timer ticked down to its final moments. People everywhere held their breath as the final seconds approached. The world had chosen its course. Humanity had decided to act, to prove they would not be broken by fear or uncertainty. They had found their strength. They had found their unity. And then, just as the timer reached zero, the alien ships did something unexpected. They moved. For the first time since their arrival, the alien vessels began to shift in the sky, repositioning in a way that had never been seen before. They were aligning themselves, almost as if they were waiting. Dr. Caldwell watched the sky, her mind racing. The moment was drawing near. The aliens were about to make their next move. Humanity had made its choice. It was no longer about survival. It was about proving their worth. And as the alien ships aligned in the sky, something within Dr. Caldwell told her, this was it. The trap had been set, but the tables were about to turn. Humanity had passed the test, and the real battle had only just begun.